Hello, today's Friday, March 1st. This is day 147. I've been doing daily updates since October 7th. These are news updates, sometimes with a bit of commentary. I seek to tell stories from Palestinians, from Israelis. The main goal is to end all of the violence, from the atrocities of October 7th to the horrific bombing campaign on Gaza, to end killing, to call for an end to the occupation. In terms of Gaza aid, the UN Secretary General said that the killing of over 100 Gazans seeking aid yesterday requires an effective independent investigation. And we at CMEP put out a statement today, joining the patriarchs and heads of churches in Jerusalem, condemning the atrocious and despicable events yesterday as Palestinians sought aid. The Israeli military opened fire. There was a stampede. It caused the death of more than 100 people, more than 700 injuries. We, alongside Christians in the US and around the world, join the voices of millions of people calling for an end to the violence, that violence would be brought to a complete end, comprehensive ceasefire might be reached. We're calling for immediate and adequate humanitarian assistance to be allowed into Gaza, the immediate release of hostages in exchange for Palestinian prisoners, and that the core causes of the ongoing crisis be addressed. We're praying alongside of our brothers and sisters in Christ in the Holy Land who have suffered and experienced trauma, and all who've experienced trauma from the atrocities of the October 7th attacks, any violence between warring parties, and the ongoing injustices of occupation and human rights abuses. South Africa said the incident breached the ICJ's provisional orders that had been issued previously. They're calling for an immediate ceasefire. The Egyptian Foreign Minister Shokri said today that Egypt is hopeful that talks initiated by Qatar could lead to a ceasefire in Gaza before the start of Ramadan. Remember, that's March 10th. Whereas I woke up this morning and the Washington Post had reported that hopes are diminishing for an immediate diplomatic breakthrough that could see Hamas free its remaining hostages and hostilities cease. And so the Washington Post gave a bit of an analysis. It said some analysts couldn't help but consider the irony of how the U.S. dropping supplies onto a population that's seeking respite from months of Israeli attacks that many of which are using U.S.-made munitions. Well done, Washington Post, for stating the obvious. It's true, though. It's true. But that's part of what we've been talking about. We have to really call to account most or many of the weapons being used in Gaza are U.S.-made. The Washington Post said such measures would mostly serve to relieve the guilty consciences of senior U.S. officials. This is a quote from Scott Paul from Oxfam. Would serve to relieve the guilty consciences of senior U.S. officials whose policies are contributing to the ongoing atrocities and risk of famine in Gaza. A number of top UN officials voiced their alarm on Thursday, saying, "I'm appalled at the reported killing and injury of hundreds of people during the transfer of aid supplies west of Gaza City." That was Martin Griffiths, the UN's lead humanitarian officer. He said, "Life is draining out of Gaza at a terrifying speed." Today is the third day of the march in Israel from Ra'im, the site near the Nova Festival massacres, to Jerusalem. About 1,000 people now have joined those marches. It's family members of those still being held hostage in Gaza. In Tel Aviv, family members held a rally outside of the U.S. Embassy in support of the president, in support of Biden's administration. Others blocked a major street next to the embassy, lighting blue and red smoke bombs. The death toll in Gaza is now at 30,228 Palestinians, 71,377 injured. It's been reported by Hamas that 7 Israeli hostages were killed in Israel's bombardment in the last few days. The EU Commission said that it's going to pay $54 million that was past due to UNRWA. I'd announced in the last couple of days, it has been announced that UNRWA funding was being released by the EU. And President Biden called on House Republicans to pass the foreign aid bill that would allow for emergency funding. Biden said yesterday it will help ensure that Israel can defend itself against Hamas and other threats, and it will also provide critical humanitarian aid. In the West Bank, it was announced that Jewish settlers established a new illegal outpost near the Eli settlement overnight into Friday, a day after the shooting attack that killed 2 Israelis there near a gas station, or at a gas station near an entrance to the settlement. And again, the Washington Post reported today that perhaps the most agonizing in all of this is the ordeal for Gaza's children. There are a myriad of anecdotes of babies and children wasting away without adequate food and dying from poisoning due to consuming animal feed, which some are substituting in their diets because of the absence of flour. UNICEF reported that about 17,000 children in Gaza are unaccompanied or are separated from their families, and that an entire generation of Palestinian children will be scarred by the toll of war, the obliteration of their homes, their schools, and having experienced deep trauma of evading bombs while grieving loss. Inside of Israeli politics, battles are far between the far-right Ben-Gvir and Shin Bet mark further internal discord. So it was announced in the news that Israel released dozens of Palestinians who were held under administrative detention. That's the detention where there's no court case. They're held. It's kind of administrative detention means there's no court case, there's no specific charges brought forward. So they were released, and this sparked response from Ben-Gvir. The IDF and Shin Bet announced today in Israel that they had been announced, and more are due to be freed in the next month. According to sources, that was for the purpose of freeing up space for detainees who represent a higher level of threat. The prison service in Israel issued a statement saying that they were following the instructions of the defense establishment, but Ben-Gvir slammed the decision and said that he was contradicting that official claim, that this stemmed from overcrowding. The head of Palestinian prisoners, Fares, said that the administrative detainees were associated with Fatah, that's the political party of the Palestinian Authority, that no Hamas or Islamic Jihad members were among those released. And he also supported Shin Bet's claim that the move was to free up space in the prisons. So that has been a conversation in Israeli and Palestinian politics in the last 2 days. Family members of hostages held in Gaza are blocking a major Tel Aviv street next to the U.S. Embassy. I had said that already. And I did talk about the reinstatement of UNRWA aid from the EU as well. Reports in Syria that an Iranian commander was killed in alleged Israeli airstrikes have been in the news, in addition to 2 others. That was this morning, according to Syrian Observatory for Human Rights. Reportedly, extensive damage was done to a villa that was attacked and the houses surrounding it. This is quite significant because while many of these attacks have been happening since October to what are called Iranian-backed militias, this is an Iranian commander in Syria. This is kind of what they're calling the Iranian proxy war. And what's significant about that is we don't know if or when this could tip into a broader regional war. And so right now, these attacks are isolated incidents. In large part, they remain underreported. We don't hear a ton about them, but an Iranian commander, killed in their home is what this sounds like to me, is quite significant. And they aren't Syrian citizens, according to this report. This is from the Washington Post. But it means that this kind of proxy war, which could be between Hezbollah and the US or Hezbollah and Western forces, is continuing kind of behind the scenes, if you will. I wanted to close with an update on the whole scenario with Justin Welby. I gave an update a few days ago about Justin Welby, the Archbishop of Canterbury's lack of willingness or his cancellation of the meeting with Pastor Munter Itzhak from Bethlehem. He wasn't willing to meet with him because Reverend Dr. Itzhak had shared a podium with someone in the UK who was accused of being anti-Semitic. And The Guardian published a piece that said Justin Welby, the Archbishop of Canterbury, apologizes to Reverend Dr. Munter Itzhak and says he will meet with him next week in a U-turn. He expresses deep regret at his refusal to meet with the Palestinian pastor. This was a turnaround. It was because Itzhak had shared a political platform with the former Labour leader, Jeremy Corbyn. Welby said on social media he would now meet with Reverend Dr. Munter Itzhak, who's the pastor of Christmas Evangelical Lutheran Church in Bethlehem, a dear friend, of mine and of Churches for Middle East Peace, who's been critical of, what he identifies and many others do as well as a genocide in Gaza. Our group has been very clear that we clearly see it as an ethnic cleansing. We want to prevent genocide. We want the experts to be the ones to identify it as that term. Honestly, we don't care what you call it. We just want to kill. We just want to stop the massive killings. We want to stop the killing of innocent civilians. And so Reverend Itzhak's sermon at Christmas went viral when he said, if Christ were born today, it would have been under the rubble. And so it was revealed that the Archbishop had refused to meet with him in an interview with The Guardian. And Welby said, recently I declined to meet with Reverend Dr. Itzhak during his UK visit, and I apologize for, and I deeply regret this decision and the hurt, anger, and confusion that it caused. I was wrong to not meet with my brother in Christ from the Holy Land, especially at this time of profound suffering for our Palestinian Christian brothers and sisters. I look forward to speaking and praying with him next week. And Reverend Itzhak replied, thank you, Archbishop. I welcome this statement and I look forward to our meeting next week as brothers in Christ. Welby had been advised that meeting with Yitzhak would cause significant problems for his relationship with the Jewish community in the UK. And so I just have great appreciation for, all of us make mistakes. And I think it took courage for the Archbishop of Canterbury to admit his mistake. And so I pray for that meeting between these two brothers in Christ next week. And we'll continue to pray alongside of all of our efforts, calling for a ceasefire and working together toward peace.